planning to build a brand online, then you'll need a domain name. And if you're smart, you'll know that if chosen correctly, a domain name can be a fantastic aid to your branding and marketing efforts. Today, more than ever, it's important to choose domain names that are short, simple, meaningful, brandable, global, and relevant. One new domain extension that checks all these boxes is .online. It's a domain name for anything that's online. So make the most of the branding opportunity and get your very own .online domain for 90% discount for the first year using my code Jeff, J-E-F-F in capital letters at www.get.online. Hi everyone and welcome to the Jeff Bullis Show. Today I have with me Tim Ash. Now Tim originally came from the former Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Doesn't exist anymore, and I think he looks a bit Russian, really, because he's got that sort of, shaved head look. But you almost look like the president of Russia, really. I think you can maybe pull that off.
You mean my uncle, Vlad?
Oh, yeah, that's the guy. So, welcome to the show, Tim. Now, tell a little bit about Tim. Tim came to America as an immigrant when he was 8, and he's now settled in San Diego and does all sorts of interesting stuff. Like, I think he's did fencing. Is that correct, Tim?
Yeah, saber champion and athlete of the month at my university.
Okay, so I'm glad it's not the fencing where you build, fences between houses very rapidly, or got skills in that area. But it's saber rattling. Okay, so
it's more about dismembering things than putting them together.
So Tim came to the States and started a digital agency when I think hardly anyone knew what a digital agency was about 20 odd years ago. So, and then Tim's well known for speaking around the world, and as we know, that's going really well for him at the moment. Not because for all of us, that's been put on pause. So that's fine. But Tim has written a great book called Unleash Your Primal Brain, which I read yesterday. So just to let everyone know that I do my research occasionally, and great book. And some fascinating insights, and we're going to touch a little bit on that as well. So we want to ask Tim about his experience over the years in business as an entrepreneur and now as a solopreneur, and also some of his takes on life and business. And so welcome to the show, Tim. It's a pleasure to have you here.
G'day, Jeff.
Yeah, that's quite good. Really, I'm impressed. G'day, mate.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I know it's put a prawn on the bobby, not a shrimp, because shrimp.
Yeah, that's true. So, but that's all right. I learned to write American when I started my blog 12 years ago. So I do realize there's different nuances of the English language that we all need to manage as writers and content creators.
Well, I think I think it was Mark Twain put it best that he was talking about England and the U.S., but it applies to us as well, which is America and England are two countries divided by a common language.
That's correct. Yeah, well, I do like the language and try to make it as less common as possible, and well, that's writing or speaking. So, Tim, let me ask you, what brought you to America? So that's a long time ago, and so why did you come to America?
Well, I was, I guess you could say, a passenger. I was 8 years old, and my younger brother was 5, and my parents decided to emigrate from the Soviet Union. And this was early 70s when they first cracked the door for Soviet Jews to be able to leave the country. And in fact, at the time, there were only 4 countries accepting Soviet refugees, I guess you could say. Australia was one, US, Canada, and of course Israel. And we were in Rome, Italy, deciding where to go. And my dad happened to catch a transatlantic collect call to his uncle in New York. They rang his Madison Avenue apartment. He wasn't there, of course, like all good Jews. He was wintering in Florida, where it's warmer. And he got a hold of his uncle and he goes, "Hey, Uncle Saul, it's Sasha, and I'm in Rome, and we're thinking of going to Canada." That was our plan at the time. And my uncle said, no, come to America. I'll take care of everything. So that 5-minute international collect call decided where I was going to live and why I'm not a Canadian today, eh?
Well, there's a thing called sliding doors. Sometimes an event shows up and you go through one door instead of another, and that's what's fascinating about being human, is that a world of infinite possibility, and you obviously ended up in the USA. So you're 8. What were some of your early memories, and what excited you back then? Can you remember then, or?
I don't remember the transition being very hard. In retrospect, I understand it was for my parents. They were 42 and 37 respectively and gave up their families, careers, came to the U.S. We knew nothing about the U.S. So, we were bringing down comforters and cast iron frying pans because God knows what they have in the country where we're going, right? So they weren't prepared. But for us, it was a big adventure. They stuck us in public school right away. I was held back a grade. In second grade, I was supposed to be in third. 3 months later, my brother and I were fluent in English. And the next year, they advanced me to fourth, and I've been grade level ever since.
Well, I'm glad that you didn't get held back, so that's great. So did you go to New York? Was that where you first were?
Yeah, we landed, ended up in Albany, New York, which is the capital of the New York State. And then for work, my parents were both civil engineers, which was kind of like the equivalent of software engineers these days. So they were bringing in the US a lot of Indians and Chinese and Russians, people that had advanced scientific degrees or engineering degrees. And so they had a good run as civil engineers in the US. So we moved around for work. We moved from Albany to Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is a big university town, and then New Jersey near Philadelphia. And then I decided to make my first adult move all the way across the country, about 5,000 kilometers to San Diego, because I got a full ride academic scholarship on the beach at a top university, and there's a nude beach nearby. So all positives in my column.
Especially when you're a teenager. That's yeah. So, and what? And I believe you spent about 7 years at university. And tell us, so what subjects did you end up choosing, and why did you choose those subjects?
Yeah, so I wanted to do well, it was computers, my practical emigres, right? So get a good job, get a computer degree. You'll always have a job, Tim. That was the thinking. I wanted to do a visual arts minor, but then when I found out I was going to be there for 5 years as an undergraduate, there's no way to finish the computer engineering degree in 4. I decided if I picked my electives correctly, I'd do a double major. And so I did computer engineering and cognitive science, which was in the psychology department at the time and later became its own department. And then I stayed for another 7 years. I was working on my PhD in computer science, neural networks, artificial intelligence, what would now be called machine learning or deep learning.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's become a little bit more relevant today, hasn't it? So
yeah, back then it was we were working on the algorithm side, how to train the computers by example, essentially, but there weren't the data sets to train on. Well, obviously, with the advent of the internet, large data sets are not a problem anymore. We're drowning in data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are drowning in data. It's not. It's trying to choose which data to use, which data to highlight, which to prioritize. And that is really the big challenge, isn't it? We are overwhelmed with data and information, so the choice is being made for us by the machines. I certainly think we're certainly in the middle of the battle of the algorithms as AI dukes it out with humanity. And
and I have some ethical concerns about that, because what we're doing is that those algorithms pick up on subtle, again, kind of issues with the data. And those subtle issues with the data come from our biases, which a lot of times are built in, our tribalism, our belief systems, our thought patterns. And so if you let them run kind of open loop without human supervision, you're going to get all kinds of unethical or socially corrosive stuff happening if we just let the machines do things.
Yeah. And then we've got the bad actors, the ones that sort of use that data for
deliberately, for evil.
Yeah. I certainly in the technology space, and I've been in the technology space for, close to nearly 40 years after starting life as a teacher for me. But the reality, I'm an eternal optimist, but I've certainly had a bit of a varying, increasingly, I suppose, negative aspect. There's a negative aspect to it as well, which, because technology can be used for good and for evil. And you only have to look at the origin of the Nobel Peace Prize, for example, where he started the Nobel Peace Prize almost, because basically Nobel built dynamite that
Right.
that initially was used to, blow up and create quarries, but then it got used to create industrial scale war. And so every technology essentially has a dark side. And so what are some of your take on that?
Well, see, I'm not. I used to be an optimist too, as self-described as you are. I wouldn't say I'm an optimist anymore. In fact, I don't know if it's getting older, but I'm leaning towards the pessimistic end of the continuum at this point. I don't think we have a lot of runway left. We're headed off a cliff, the sixth mass extinction event in the planet's history, and we're causing this one, and we're just like whistling past the graveyard. So this is not a sustainable path we're on. I think our biggest challenge in this generation is how to soft land capitalism. So whenever I hear about growth and growth hacking and marketing and entrepreneurship, all that behind it says unsustainability to me. And it's not just we're screwing up the world for my children, which is inevitable, but we're going to feel it in our lifetimes.
Yeah, I think there's a real challenge with humanity that we're essentially turning it into our own garbage can, and we've got to make sure that we don't destroy it. I suppose I'm optimistic that we'll be able to do it, but the challenge is certainly in front of us to manage what we've got. So let's dive into a little bit about what motivated you to. So you did an undergraduate degree, and then you did another 7 years, and
then I quit 7 years into a PhD program. I never got my PhD. Should have banked my master's degree after 2 years and walked away, but I was stubborn. My dad had a PhD, my mom had her master's, so it was just kind of inertia,
Yeah.
But along the way, I worked at some large corporations, and I realized what a soul-killing environment that was. And I said, yeah, so that path doesn't work for me. The educational path, I was 29. I'm not going to start my 4th decade on this earth still in school. So I said, screw it. I took down about 200 square meters of office space, got a desk and a computer line, and I started my first, I guess you could call it, internet incubator back in 1995 to help launch new .coms. So right after Al Gore invented the interwebs.
Yeah, I heard he invented that. It's quite amazing, really. So you looked at the alternatives after leaving academia, and you went, I don't want to walk into this high-rise building and lose my soul within a corporation. Yeah. Is that really what you've...
That really happened. I worked for NCR, which is a giant company, SAIC, which is a big defense contractor / scientific company in the U.S., and that was not my thing. And I realized that pretty quickly. The money isn't worth it.
Yeah.
So I read Gerber's The E-Myth about the entrepreneurial myth, and I said, I can do this better than my bosses. And off I went. And I've been riding the tiger ever since.
So you chose uncertainty and infinite possibility over certainty and a paycheck.
Yeah, my dad had already died at this point, but when I quit the PhD program, she was trying to guilt trip me and said, your dad would be turning over in his grave right now. And we did all this for you, and we came to this country so you and your brother could have a great life and not be discriminated against. And I said, well, Mom, what did you want from me ultimately? For me to be happy, right? To get meaning and satisfaction out of my life. Well, I'm happy. This is my thing. This is the opportunity you created for me. Let me go do it. I don't need a safety net.
So why did you choose to leap into like a digital incubator startup in 95? What was the inspiration behind that? I know that you were studying cognitive science and technology. So what was the inspiration to, was there a dream in the middle of the night? Was there?
Well, it was clear to me that a new industry was being born, akin to the printing press spreading literacy in the world, and or something like that. That the internet. I saw it from the very beginning what it was going to be. Actually, we don't really know what it's going to be yet, but the early days of it I could envision anyway. So we helped launch new .coms. That's basically what we did. Help them raise their first round of financing. Acting CTO on their management team, that sort of thing. And I saw a vision when it was still kind of a cottage industry, where there weren't many people who knew how to do this. And we were like the high priest, and everyone was coming to us for advice and how to do that. And it was exciting, I won't lie. But at the end of the day, I also figured out that basically by doing any professional services firm, you're hiring your boss. So I got out of the corporate world in order to not have to work for the man. And now it's kind of like, oh, you have money? You have $25,000 a month for a retainer? Great. Let's get married before we even date. And then it's kind of like, oh, dipped into your craziness and whatever corporate culture, for lack of a better word, or dysfunction you guys operate under. And now I have to deal with that. So I realized there's a great line from the Mad Men TV show about Madison Avenue. And Don Draper says, the day you land a client is the day you start losing them. And I just realized that that's the name of the game in professional services. And I did that for 20 years and I didn't particularly enjoy it.
Yeah, I totally get it, because when I started the blog and then we started to be known as a social media expert back then, I realized that I was trading time for money, and it was really hard clients want quick results typically. But as we know, that you need to educate them first so they understand what that roadmap looks like, because a lot of them just, especially in the digital world, have no idea. And so I totally get it, and I chose not to get down that road of consulting as well. And also I've never worked for a big corporation. I've worked for small to medium companies, but the idea, I walk into the city sometimes and I see people like rats going into the high-rise buildings, and I'm just going, all right, it's for some people and it's not for others. And that's what's fantastic about being human. You can make choices whether you want to play that game or not. And
and I would say that it also ties back into what we were talking about marketing and sustainability. So you said, what led me down the path? Well, I guess you could say I studied at University of California, San Diego for a career that didn't exist. I mean, internet marketing is this perfect quantitative, qualitative mixture, right? You have to understand human psychology. It's infinitely measurable, so you can see the effect of things you're trying. So it was really, the subject matter was fun. But ultimately, when you look at it, there's nothing particularly noble about running a marketing agency. I'm just figuring out how to extract money more effectively from consumers' pockets and put it in the hands of this one company. I mean, we work with the Facebooks and Googles and Nestle's of the world on down, and created a documented $1.2 billion in incremental revenue. So it works, but it's not curing cancer, so it was ultimately just moving money around.
Right. So that took you 20 years to work out? Is that what it was?
Yeah, I'm a little more stubborn than most. It's the same reason I stayed in the PhD program for 7 years before quitting.
So what was so even though you were the high priest, obviously people were coming to you, what were some of your big challenges? You've had the call, when you started the business, what were some of the biggest challenges you found over your life as an entrepreneur?
I'd say the most consistent one was how to generate sales for a professional services firm. I went through so many salespeople, senior, junior, salaried, full commission. I tried every permutation, and that to me is the hardest thing. Somebody who knows how to sell high-end professional services consistently. And even if they know how to do that as an individual, then you need them to procedurize that knowledge. What if they punch out or get a better offer? So I'd say the ups and downs of hunting for business is probably the biggest. I always had an operational bent. I tried to procedurize how we delivered the work, but I could never figure out how to procedurize getting the work.
Right. So do you see that a little bit different today in terms of, because we have inbound marketing, content marketing, lead generation,
I
because,
mean,
yeah,
different names for the same thing. I mean, ultimately, how do you get someone to crack their wallet open for large sums of money without meeting them face to face?
yeah,
That's a
that's,
real
yep,
tough nut to crack. So, I think that somebody once told me about the death zone, and I've taken this to heart. If you have products that are under $500, they can be sold self-service. If you have something over 10,000, it's worth getting a salesperson involved who has a salary and a commission, could explain more complicated things. But if you have something that's in that 500 to 10,000, it's the death zone, because you can't effectively service it with people, and it's too complicated to buy self-service. And a lot of our products in retrospect or services fell into that price point. So
right,
that's definitely a very painful lesson I learned over time.
yeah. So, and you're also the author of a couple of books built around your experience in this space, which essentially wrote a book on landing page optimization, which,
Yes.
yeah,
Well, which do you want, the first edition in Chinese, or do you want the second edition in English? Yeah, this is, I wrote this back in 2008 and 2012. And I'd say, again, without bragging, it's kind of the Bible for conversion rate optimization for my specialty in digital marketing. That's how to make websites more effective.
mm,
And it's everything I knew when I wrote it about the topic.
mm,
Every one of those books has taken a couple of years of my life.
mm,
I always joke that writing books is like closest a man will come to having children, because it's a really painful, long, drawn out process. You're a bloody mess by the end.
mm.
And then the work really begins, which is publicizing the books.
That's right. There's a content creation, then there's the marketing. That's it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the raising children part. So you give birth to them. Now what? You still have to raise them.
Now, I believe you have a keynote speech based around people's websites, and I think it's got a pretty cool name. What's the name of that keynote based upon websites? Is it something like
Well,
your website sucks or something? Or how?
yeah, pretty close. I have a chapter in the book called "Your Baby is Ugly."
Right.
It all gets everyone's attention. But just like our own babies, we think they're beautiful, even though they're burping, farting, drooling machines, right?
Hmm.
This is kind of like someone gives you their baby, you go, "Oh, he's so alert." You have to say something nice, but obviously they're ugly babies, because that's where ugly adults come from. There are plenty of those.
Yeah.
But nobody will admit their baby is ugly, that their website has problems, because they love it. They've nurtured it. They've put tens of thousands of hours building it and staring at it, so that it makes sense to them. But if you just take that dispassionate, somebody's coming to your site for the first time and doesn't give a crap view, then they're ugly, very ugly.
Hmm. I do love the title of the keynote. Frankly, I think it's really, really cool. Yeah, it's true. Everything that we create ourselves thinks it's great. Well, most of the time we do. Sometimes we go, no, it's not. But this dispassionate observation of a website or observation of a creation, where someone walks and goes, this needs some optimization so it converts
Yeah.
better, and you get more traffic, you get more leads, and you get more customers.
Yeah, and so the biggest mind shift that I've has kind of underlined all of our work at Site Tuners, which was my agency. Again, I sold it off about a year and a half ago to business partners, and it's thriving. Again, because it's not me at the helm, and I didn't want to do it. But the mindset we adopted was, you have to think from the viewpoint of the customers or the prospects. And it's an outside in. It's not an inside out where you're broadcasting your brand bullshit to the world. And it's about people. They have problems, they have pains, they don't know how to solve them. They may bring misconceptions to it. They don't have a lot of time. All of that reality, that's who you should be building for. And a lot of times within companies or even marketing departments, the customer is not at the table. It's all the insider view. It's, how are our campaigns doing, and what are our key performance indicators? Where's the customer and all that? So we always advocated for the customer, and that's how we made our clients money.
Right. And how much did content, because content marketing became a buzzword about 10 odd years ago, was and still is, inbound marketing. How did the rise of content and social media impact the business?
That's a great question. By the way, content marketing, inbound marketing, they're the same. I sat down and was talking to my buddy Brian Halligan, who runs HubSpot, and they're the ones that kind of coined that whole inbound marketing term. And they were kind of deciding which one to go with. And they wanted to kind of go with inbound and brand it. And they did get a lot of traction over the years with it. So good for them. But content marketing isn't new. But I think 95% of companies do it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So what passes for content marketing is activity based. It's pumping out crap. Let's tweet it. Let's go viral. Let's blog post this and 2-minute video that. And it's all about just like pushing stuff out to the world. My view of content marketing is you have to map it to your audience. You have to map it to the complete customer journey. And you have to fill in the gaps for them to kind of self-service slide down the sales funnel by using content marketing. Because most things are self-service until you get to that last 10, 20%. Mm-hmm. So they don't even want to talk to you. They don't want to be a lead. They don't want to fill out your form. They don't want you to call them. So they want to do it all self-service. And that's where the content marketing comes in. So content marketing to me is durable, high quality, maps to the whole customer journey, including the early parts where you can't make money off of them yet, but you still should be useful to people. And so it's a very different flavor. It's not activity based or anything like that. It's about being of service to your customers.
Yeah. So let's dive into that a little bit deeper, and let's look at what are the steps in a content marketing journey for your customers. Where does it start and where does it finish, and what are the steps in between for content marketing that works rather than just creating activity?
Yeah, well, we actually, as an agency, have had this, still have what we call the content for conversion audit. So the goal is conversion. It's not just content for content's sake. The goal is to support people eventually raising their hand and acting. So the first thing you have to do is identify your customer segments. Some people call it personas, but that's more of a, pardon me, bullshit advertising term for media buying. But understand tribes and affinities and market segments. Okay. The next thing you have to understand is the values of those people. Mm-hmm. And that's critical because the cultural values say a lot. For example, if you buy Patagonia outdoor gear, you pretty much be sure they're against global warming, that they're for sustainability, and that the people that care about that stuff are in their tribe, right? Yep. Knowing nothing else, you know about the values of the people that would buy from them. And if I say to you, it's sustainable in your Patagonia client, you care. If I say that to somebody that doesn't care about that stuff, the message just isn't going to land. So before you come up with messaging, you have to understand the cultural values of those tribes or segments. Then you can come up with messaging. And then again, one of the things you have to do is we did an audit of the whole customer journey. So just take the sales funnel and put it on its side, if you will. Awareness, interest, desire, action, right? The traditional sales funnel. What do you have right now that supports each of those steps? You do an inventory. Is it written content? Is it downloadable? Is it on your website? Is it your YouTube channel? Is it your, Instagram, stuff you're posting there? And then you say, is it the right thing? Is it the right editorial tone? Is there a clear tone of voice and a positioning that's going to hit to that cultural tribe? What are the calls to action to do that little micro conversion, slide them down funnel, have them consume the next piece of content? What format do you want to have it in? I know your show, we're doing a podcast, but it's going to be a video. It's going to have outtakes. Some people prefer that kind of stuff as opposed to listening to the whole podcast, right? So yep. Give it to them in the format they want. And then map out all of that and create the missing stuff. Mm-hmm. And also figure out the gating strategy, which is, should you ask for an email? Mm-hmm. Should you ask for a long form fill? Well, in some cases, the answer is yes or no. It depends on the stage in the funnel and what your goals are. So all of that, to me, is content marketing.
I really like it, especially like the values part. So what are the values? The Patagonia audience example you used, I think is great. And content marketing It can be used for blunt force trauma, just activity based, and it will work. It just won't be as efficient and optimized as you say in your book. So,
well, I can say content marketing, the way you just call it, blunt force trauma, content marketing as an awareness raising tool or as a driving traffic, as an acquisition tool is one thing. What I'm talking about is a conversion tool.
Yep.
Okay, once they engage with you, how do you support the customer journey? That's a very different animal.
Yeah, well, that's why I was describing it as blunt force trauma content marketing, which is activity based. That's really,
Yeah.
and when I started, it very much was blunt force trauma content marketing, because I got up at 4:30 a.m. and just created content because I loved the content, and I didn't really give a crap about converting anything because I had a day job. For me, it was just a passion project, right? So,
Right.
It got a little bit more serious over time, so we've had to move from blunt force trauma to being a little bit smarter and, more the ballet dancer, the engineer, the auditor,
the impeccable warrior, the Tai Chi master. Yeah.
That's right. Anyway, whatever. But so I did that really badly, by the way. You can see that I don't do any Tai Chi. So I think maybe
I won't hold it against you. I studied with a master from Hong Kong here in San Diego for 5 years. I'm actually one of only a couple of people in the U.S. that he's certified to teach part of the art. But yeah, that's always been a passion of mine.
Yeah. So you sell the business and it's got its challenges. You decide that you want to pivot and sell it. So what made you want to exit stage left and become a solopreneur? What was there a moment that that showed up?
Well, okay. So I think the longer I live, the more I realize the importance of being true to your nature. I mean, that sounds kind of obvious, right? But don't put yourself in environments where you're going to fail or be frustrated or, get your soul sucked out of you, or some combination of those. And so over the years, I've taken a bunch of personality typing tests. On Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENFP. Enneagram type 7. On DISC, I'm a dominant influencer. On the Ocean model, I'm not very neurotic and extremely extroverted, and so on. You have all of these. They basically all describe me from different angles, but they're saying the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that if you have two choices in life. You can try to shore up your weaknesses, or you can just double down on your strengths. And I had to do a reset for a pretty significant kind of life chapter. And I decided I'm just going to double down on my strengths and outsource or just dismiss my weaknesses. So managing people, empire building, whether it's customers or employees, not a lot of fun for me, not for my personality. Yeah. So I was like, what can I do alone? And so it's that subset of consulting services that I like to deliver by myself, where I add a lot of value, where I can get paid well, and that are also in and out engagements for the most part. I only have one kind of long-term service. It's an executive marketing advisor, and I carefully handpick those to make sure I have a good relationship with the senior marketer I'm working with. But everything else, I like to be in and out. I'm the guy that's going to tell you your baby is ugly, or what your internet strategy should be, or come in and train your marketing department, or do rip down review of your website, no holds barred, and then I ride off into the sunset. That's my value add. I don't care whether you implement the changes I give you. Yep. That and your problems with your IT department, that's you and your organizational crap. So I do not enjoy that. And so I've just gotten rid of all of it. So I'm focusing on my keynote speaking, thought leadership, the new book on evolutionary psychology. And so basically just aligning with my passions and my purpose.
So let's dive into the primal brain, unleash your primal brain, because I read it yesterday and I took some notes, so if I look like I'm reading, I am. So I think you may have already answered this. So what motivated you to write this book as opposed to the brain-numbing, eye-tearing, wrist-slashing optimization topic? Because I spoke at a conference last year about optimization, and I'm not a detail guy, you see. So that's what. So for me, I hate optimization in the sense that I love what it does. I love
the ROI.
I love the ROI. What I don't like is the detail. So that's and I love what you said. Hire people that do what you hate doing. I hire people to do that. And so I'm not the attention to detail guy, but I do love creating a beautiful baby. That takes time. So you're really the plastic surgeon for businesses to make more money, but do it in a beautiful way. So I'm sorry that I look like I offended you on the optimization side, but it's...
No, not at all. You have me confused with someone who gives a shit.
Yeah, so you get into an area that you are much more passionate about, and essentially this almost sounds like a beautiful midlife crisis where you're going, I'm actually going to do what I love doing.
Well, that was certainly a part of it. And there are a lot of people that in my immediate orbit that were agency heads and just did it for 10 to 20 years. They're really good at it and they don't need the hassle, and their reputation speaks for itself. So there's enough inbound stuff so that you don't have to, really worry about the kids' college fund, right? But the reason I wrote this book is actually a little more nuanced, and I would like to go into it for a minute. When we did our work as site tuners, we kind of learned in the trenches, right? What works and what doesn't. It's that 0 moment of truth. Does someone act or not on your website? You can't bullshit your way through that. So we learned the hard way. And again, we worked with hundreds of companies around the world and created a lot of value for them. The thing is, our customers use that ethically, I guess, for the most part. You'd say to create better user experiences, align better with messaging and their target audience, that sort of thing, remove friction and so on.
Yep.
That's legitimate, I guess you'd call white hat marketing. The problem is that a lot of companies don't do it that way. And you alluded to that earlier, that there's some pretty sketchy companies and organizations and governments that use that for evil. So having grown up in the Soviet Union, I've seen the effects of that. When you actually manipulate people and their psychology for evil. And so when I came to this country, I guess to the US, I was a little bit of an odd duck because I always had that parallax view, and I was on the lookout for, am I being manipulated, mass groupthink, propaganda? All of that was in the back of my mind. And unfortunately, I saw it everywhere. Just because we're in a free society doesn't mean that we're not being manipulated. And it's not a fair playing field. These giant companies, like we were talking about, they have data scientists, economists, neuromarketing guys, medical imaging people, and they're all there to get those little hits of dopamine, get you addicted to their product, get you to keep on with the subscription. And they're strip mining us for money, for political divisions, and I think ultimately for more conflict and destruction in this world. And we're kind of, as consumers, bringing the proverbial knife to the gunfight. So this book was my attempt to kind of level the playing field and say, hey, this is how your brain really operates from an evolutionary perspective.
Yep.
In order to understand what all 8 billion of us on the planet have in common, you have to retrace that evolutionary arc from the earliest life and what we inherited from them to the bizarre, distinctly human things that make us very different. And so it's an attempt to take that beyond the marketing world, kind of give it as a gift to all of us, saying this is like being human 101. Understand it and take yourself into better account. So it applies to business, leadership, marketing, persuasion, but also culture, tribes, gender differences, personal relationships, that's all in there. And personal development, sleep, managing your expectations, what is happiness. All of those things come from an evolutionary psychology perspective. And so my red thread was to condense all of that in a non-scientific, very readable way and explain you to you.
I love the phrase that you include in the book. The book is about the why behind our behaviour.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of what you're trying to do, the concept, which is you're trying to create awareness of how the game's being played and how we live our lives. And
yeah.
I think we sometimes just walk through life and not be aware rather than stepping back. And you've had the lens of living in 2 different countries. And you turned up with a bullshit detector when you turned up to America because of your experience in the country of your birth.
That's right.
So you didn't turn up with rose-colored glasses. You turned up with a bullshit detector.
Yeah, and I wasn't dipped into the cultural matrix of America, so I can step back from it and question it. And it's
Yeah.
not just America. I mean, there's these kind of psychological manipulations are being used by corporations and governments worldwide.
And platforms are built with neuroscientists that are designing for addiction.
Yeah, my buddy Neri Yal wrote a fantastic book on that subject, which is called Hooked, How to Create Habit-Forming Products. Now, he's trying to create the antidote to that in his latest book, which is called Indistractable, which I love. Again, trying to kind of rebalance the scales a little bit in our favor as individuals.
Yeah, and I've read both of those books, and they're great. The time which we live is fascinating in the sense that we have two obsessive addictive technologies that have shown up pretty well at the same time. Number one, social media, even though maybe it wasn't designed to be addictive from step one, it certainly is designed now to be as addictive as possible, to keep you on their platforms as much as possible. That's led me to turn off every alert for any of my social media platforms. I can distract myself without them distracting me. The other obsessive technology was the democratization of the smartphone, where Steve Jobs brought out the iPhone and gave it to the masses. Because before it was the BlackBerry, which was the smartphone for the elite.
Right.
So the democratization of the smartphone at a price point and usability that made it available to everyone. And then you've got the rise of the Android and the Samsung phones and so on. So these two obsessive technologies showed up at the same time. That's
what I have is a Samsung, by the way. I haven't gone over to the dark side. Sorry, Apple people.
So these two addictive technologies showed up pretty well at the same time. This is where the intersection of technologies became incredibly powerful and addictive. And that was one of the reasons I started the blog, was because of my observation of both those platforms. And I was just curious about how this was going to play out, and I still am today. But with that technology, addictive technology for both those, there is a price to pay.
Oh yeah, a high one.
And it's a big price. I'm a little concerned, for the children of that generation, in that I think they're going to be missing some core skills that make us human, and that's our ability to communicate effectively. I think also some areas such as a lot of them are I think there's a lot of non-awareness of what it means to be human, because they've lost themselves in the machines. I'd be interested in your take on that.
Yeah, so I think that there's so much to unpack there. I'm just going to do some quick reacts to the things that came up when you were talking. I agree with you about mobile phones are a huge problem. I've taken a concerted effort. I went through an initiation retreat through this wonderful international organization I know you guys have in Australia too, called the Mankind Project. And I sit in this weekly men's group. And one of the goals I did was actually this past week was to keep this freaking thing out of my bedroom when I go to bed at night. Mm-hmm. And it really changed my going to bed routine. I'm much more conscious when I write in my gratitude journal. I wake up, I open a book in bed, I do some personal development and reading, and that's how I start my day, not by checking my notifications on social media or reading the New York Times on my phone. And I got to tell you, it's been a definite net plus. I'm also thinking of how these platforms contribute to the breakdown of society. And even though I have a huge investment in Facebook and LinkedIn and huge audiences there and on Twitter, I'm definitely thinking about pulling the plug on some of that stuff, which is a high price to pay if you're a public figure. But it's getting that bad. I really see them as so corrosive to Facebook, especially to the existence of common identity or democracies, that I see it as a force for evil driven by money. Because ultimately, when we talk about social media, what we're talking about is understanding you so well on 500 factors that we can create the perfect customized Jeff experience for you. Your feed is only showing you what Jeff likes, right? there's no common frame of reference. Even to go back to pre-cable days in the US, we had 4 major channels: ABC, CBS, NBC, and public television. Maybe a couple on the UHF part of the TV dial, right? But everybody watched the same shows. Everybody watched the same newscasters. And when you came in on Monday morning, you were talking about Saturday Night Live because everybody watched that on Saturday night. And now there's no common transmission of cultural values. Everybody gets their custom tailored, reinforced, grievance driven, most kind of negative, activating you with fear and cortisol kind of stuff. So if there's no common reality, I mean, literally, there is no truth, there is no science. There, yes means no. It's just like being in 1984 or something. And there's no way liberal democracies can hold together. So you're seeing strains like this in Hungary, in Poland, in Turkey, in Germany. They just had to disband an elite commando battalion in Germany because it was infiltrated by the far right.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's throughout the German armed forces as well. And I mean, I hate to say it, but I could see a civil war happening in the US. I mean, we've had a good 240-year run, but empires aren't, don't last forever. And we're going to have our comeuppance, especially if Trump wins a re-election here, which is still a distinct possibility. And all of that is Mark Zuckerberg. I lay a lot of it at his feet because he controls Facebook, prioritizing the making of money through this kind of psychological manipulation.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm watching from afar what's happening in the USA, and I have conversations with many people like yourself, and including Alexandra Watkins, and there's a lot of people that are quite afraid of what the future may hold. Yeah, we're walking into the future with rose-coloured glasses maybe 10, 20 years ago going, isn't this great? We've got a computer we can use. And for me, the social media was great because I could watch America wake up on Twitter, and I used to have fun conversations, and it was very innocent before it became industrialized. And now it's becoming a little scarier, and let's hope that we can navigate this, because I sure hope we can as a human nature. Now, the other things, moving on to another topic, is you mentioned 2 areas that about being human. One is the primal brain, which is the subconscious, is another term for it. I think even you use that. And then you've got the conscious brain. These are the 2 big categories. So we think the conscious is making these decisions, but in fact, the primal brain is making these decisions. So I'm interested in your thoughts on those 2 key areas that you cover in your book.
Yeah, so I start the book, my chapter 1 is the lie of rationality. The big lie that we've been told, especially in the West, since the days of Socrates, is that we're qualitatively different because of our reasoning ability and being able to plan and think and be logical, Mr. Spock-like, if you will. And then our base animal nature is something to be corralled and harnessed, and like riding a wild horse or something like that, right? But what makes us distinctly human is this rational side. And that, in fact, is not true. What we have is like an evolutionary set of Band-Aids. Something worked, something else was built on top of it and modified, and then another layer was built on top of it. And that's how evolution goes. And that modern part of the brain is not in charge. In fact, it's kept in the dark and asleep most of the time. Most of our stuff happens automatically. Some of it based on reactions that never get modified. Some of it based on our personal history and strongly emotional, positive and negative memories we have of certain events and their impact on our survival chances. And then the distinctly human part is actually not there to do 2 + 2 is 4, or to put people on the moon or build microwave ovens. It's actually there to model the complexity of the social dynamics in our immediate tribe. So it's kind of like, oh, okay, Jeff, you mentioned my good friend Alexandra, who lives about 4 blocks from me here in San Diego. Oh, Jeff's knows Alexandra, so if I badmouth Jeff's buddy, will it get back to him through her? And then how will that impact my chances and my standing in the tribe? Okay, it's the real-time modeling of all of that. We're the most social of mammals by far, and we have a close group of about 100 to 200 people that we can model those intimate relationships with. And that's what the modern brain is for. So it's literally, when we stop doing 2 + 2 is 4, within a split second, we go back to modeling our social world. That's what we spend all of our spare cycles doing.
I think you just covered some really interesting areas there that, we think we're in control and we're not. You only have to stand back and watch the chatter of your own mind if you're willing to step back and watch that. And there's a great book by Michael Singer called Untethered Soul. I don't know if you've read it, but it's one of the best books I've read in 10 years, apart from yours, of course.
Nice recovery.
So what I think for us to, as humans, to be as aware as possible of why our behaviour is what it is. And we ask the question, who are you? And people say, well, I'm a mum, I'm a dad, I'm a corporate executive, I'm a CEO. Well, no, you're not. That's just the outcome of... So you are the watcher of the doer.
All of those other things,
Yeah.
All of those other roles you take on and cultural packages you've had handed down to you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think, the thing I loved about his book was being able to step back and go, what am I chatting about? What's my mind saying right now? And then there's the other stuff that's unspoken and not even felt, which is the unconscious side, which you talked about, the primal brain side, which is really running the show.
Yeah. In fact, if you can put something into words, it's too late. Robert Heinlein said in the 50s, man is not a rational animal, man is a rationalizing animal. So anything you're likely to say verbally is an after the fact, bullshit made up explanation. The decision was made emotionally. In fact, it can only be made emotionally. The rational mind provides us with options, but based on our affinities and aversions, the emotional brain narrows that down to something actionable and makes the decision. You literally cannot make a decision without emotion.
Yeah, and one of the quotes you used in your book too, which resonates with me, was, "I think, therefore I am."
That's the lie of rationality. Descartes screwed us back in the 1700s by telling us that.
Yeah, and it's not something I believe in, by the way, even though it resonated with me decades ago. But I realised that thinking is not what makes me. I am not my thinking. If that was the case, I'd be an absolute bloody madman.
Well, the jury's still out on that one, Jeff.
Oh, absolutely. So I've got no monopoly on truth, much as we would like as humans to think that we do. So another quote I love too is, "The brain is not separate from the body," and you talked about things like routine and what are some of your daily practices. So talk a little bit about what's your routine that you try and that uses part of your daily rituals. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, it's important to understand that the brain is just an organ. I mean, I'm not talking about the mind versus the brain versus awareness and consciousness. I'm not talking about philosophical concepts. I'm just saying, within your body, the brain is a very energy intensive system, like digestion or voluntary movement of your muscles, things like that, that you just have to balance. But the brain literally extends from your head to every joint in your body and to the very tips of your digits. The central nervous system is really a more accurate representation. And what we're learning recently, I didn't write too much about or at all about this in the book, is that there are other intelligences in the body. Your solar plexus is a big nerve cluster. The gut biome, like the bacteria inside of your digestive system, there's a constant communication between the body and the brain. Sometimes the brain sends signals to different organs. Sometimes they secrete stuff and send signals back to the brain. So it's all kind of has to stay in a homeostasis and balance, and the brain isn't some distinct thing. So if you're going to have a good life and if you're going to have a healthy brain, you need to exercise and eat well. Most people know that, but sleep is also a critical part of it. In fact, it's not sleep, exercise and diet and sleep. It's sleep, then everything else. Because every form of life on earth sleeps, and it's not optional, and you can't cheat it. And especially for human beings who have shorter but more intense sleep, we absolutely need our 7 to 9 hours a day. So if you're getting less than that, fix that if you want to fix your life.
Yeah. Uh, the area you touched on regarding the importance of the body, certainly the digestive tract is got some of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's got the big. I think it's got some of the biggest number of, greatest quantity of nerves in the human body, and it's been given a nickname as a second brain.
Yeah.
And we're only just tapping into this. Like you said, the bio
Intelligence. Yeah.
intelligence, and I certainly have been trialing things such as intermittent fasting to rest the body.
Yeah. I do the fast diet as well.
Yeah. So it's not. I don't call it a diet. I just call it a way of eating.
Yeah. No. I mean, that's what it was originally called. I agree. It's a lifestyle. It's not with the goal of dropping weight or something. Yeah.
No. Yeah. So I do the 18. I do the 18 or 16/8 intermittent fasting. So I usually don't. I stop eating around about 8 o'clock at night, and I don't eat till about midday the next day. And
I do a 5 to 9 in the morning. Same thing, 16 hours.
There you go. So I certainly did lose a little bit of weight. Not that I was overweight or anything, but it certainly, for some people, it seems to have worked well. Others it doesn't. Some people have trouble doing it because they get hangry.
Guilty.
That's
That
right.
happens.
That's right. So now the other part, which some other parts of the book that I really liked was, and one of them was social. You talked about storytelling, its power, its importance. Tell me a little bit about your perspective on storytelling.
Absolutely. Well, again, this is everything in my book, and you can't reduce it down to just our bodies and evolution, but that's the thread through my book, the red thread, if you will. It ties everything together. And from a survival aspect, evolutionary aspect, storytelling has two main purposes. The first is to basically simulate things. So like if you've seen the movie Sophie's Choice, where she's in the concentration camp and she literally has to decide which of her two children are going to die. I mean, I hope that you never have to make that Sophie's choice, right?
Yep.
But we can go into that theater, watch that tragedy, watch that decision, learn something from it, simulate it without being harmed ourselves. So when someone tells us a story, the storyteller's and the listener's mind literally syncs up at the level of meaning, not just words or sounds, but at the level of meaning. And we're just in sync. It's a mind meld. It bypasses all of your logical defenses. If I say, well, you know, I think we should logically do this, that's one thing. If I say, let me tell you a story, it's a completely different mechanism, and you can't resist it. And that's why it's storytelling has been there from the very beginning. So it's a form of simulation, and that's important. The other thing it is it's a form of cultural transmission. It's to reinforce the values and beliefs and knowledge within our tribe and to keep tribal cohesion. And so we're built for culture spread. And one of the key things about it is that we tell stories in order to reinforce our values. And so stories don't actually mean the same thing to everybody. Let me tell you an objective event, okay, or a story, if you will, from my book that I use as an example. Let's say you're watching a bullfight, and the bullfighter deftly steps away with his cape, and as the bull charges mere centimeters from him, stabs down between its shoulder blades with the sword and kills the wild beast. Well, if you're in Spain, you probably think of that as honor and glory and the impeccable warrior tradition of the matador and man versus raw, powerful nature and the nobility of that. Whereas people for the ethical treatment of animals think of that as barbaric animal torture subsidized by those people sitting in the stands and paying money. Same objective story and set of facts looked at very differently based on the cultural beliefs of your tribe.
Yep. So I came to about 7 or 8 years ago, I decided that my presentations were all about facts and figures, and that's the fastest way to put people to sleep.
Death by PowerPoint, I call it.
Yeah, images so complex and small that your eyes bleed trying to read them. I had some great coaching, and I discovered the power of storytelling, and I'm sure you use that a lot in your keynotes as well. And it's because you can get to touch people's souls You can expose your own soul. Another is the power of vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're willing to bare your soul on stage, or even in an interview, on a podcast, whatever, a seminar, uh, I think people go, "Hey, this person's real. They bleed.
Yeah.
They hurt."
It's funny because I went through the same transition as a speaker. I've done a couple of hundred keynotes across 4 continents. I've been to your beautiful country 6 or 7 times to keynote at events. And I guess I had the same transition. First I started with data and information. I'm going to fire hose you. And it's just bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, here, drink from the fire hose. Then I started having more visual images as backgrounds, and then I'd speak to them. By the way, there's a great book called Presentation Zen by Garr, Garr. That's great about how to make compelling visuals with your slides. But then the next level stuff is not just the presentation, but like you say, the hooks, and storytelling are, how would you say, compelling, unavoidable hooks. You can't not follow along with a story.
Mm.
So.
And yeah, Joseph Campbell is one of my heroes. And
same here.
Yeah, the hero's journey.
Yes.
This whole story arc that's led to literally hundreds of top-selling movies. I don't know, but you might, whether you've watched any of an interview series done back in the late '80s, shortly before he died. He went to George Lucas's ranch and was interviewed by one of America's top.
Star Wars, they ripped it off.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and look, the Joseph Campbell's, and if you watch, this is 6 one-hour interviews done by one of America's top not newsreader.
Bill Moyers.
Yeah, Bill Moyers, isn't it? Yes. Yeah. So, but Bill Moyers interviewed Joseph Campbell, and I've watched it 3 or 4 times. And
absolutely, yeah. That whole miniseries, The Power of Myth, is just so powerful.
And now maybe you might be able to help me. It used to be on Netflix. Now it's not. I think it's been removed. So it used to be readily available. I think someone's maybe bought the rights to it or something. So I don't know where it's hidden. I've really struggled to find it. But if anyone, say to all our listeners, and we'll just talk about storytelling, and we're both big, Joseph Campbell fanboys. But incredible series. If you can watch it, The Power of Myth with Joseph Campbell and Bill Moyers.
Or read the book. There's a beautiful illustrated book. I have 2 copies because I was always handing them out to people and figure I better have one in reserve.
So which book was that?
The Power of Myth, and it's an illustrated book based on that miniseries.
Right. All right. I'll go and get that. I'll order that as soon as we finish here. So just wrapping up, I came to the end of your book, and you made some major points. So I'm going to list these major points. So the summation of Unleash Your Primal Brain by Tim Ash. Number 1, you've already mentioned this, sleep. Number 2, be in your body. Number 3, access intuition and emotions. Number 4, avoid artificial addictions. Number 5, don't be a loner. And number 6, learn from others and teach. So let's just maybe have a quick summation of each of these areas. And maybe a sentence or 2 on each one would be enough, I think.
Okay, well, if you prompt me through them again, so sleep.
Yeah,
don't cheat yourself.
Yep.
7 to 9 hours on a regular basis, or else you're miscalibrating your emotions, becoming an aggressive, paranoid asshole.
I love that summation. Number 2, be in your body.
A lot of things are body scale, and I found the power of just small rituals throughout the day and connecting with your physicality is critical. So, heartbeat rhythms are tied to music, cadences, and things like that. Everything is body scale. So start experiencing your body, where you hold emotions, where you hold tension, and exercise is definitely a part of that.
Cool.
And I think mindfulness practices like meditation and Tai Chi and things like that, or yoga are critical as well to have as daily habits.
I think it's a great tip, and I've been meditating since the 1980s. I didn't do it for quite some time, but I'm certainly back into it in the last...
Never too late.
couple of years. I've done a lot over the years, and it's where I go when times get tough. Especially, that's when you've got to double down on these routines.
Self-care is critical.
Yeah. Number 3, access intuition and emotions.
Yeah, so it's turning the whole thing on its head and saying, rationality is not the thing to strive for, and being logical and detached and clinical is not how we should operate. To be fully embodied, to pay attention to our emotions, that's where we should be operating, and relishing that instead of shoving it down and trying to suppress it.
Yeah, I think listening to your body, listening to your mind. In other words, being aware and let the unlimited possibility of the horizon show up. That's when I think the universe talks to you and humanity talks to us, because we're very much social and tribal. The other one, avoid artificial addictions. We know where this is going to go, so over to you on this one.
Well, it's important to understand that what passes for happiness chemicals in our brain, oxytocin, opioids, and the cannabinoids, dopamine, they all exist in our brain. In fact, they're manufactured either in our brain or elsewhere in our body. They're necessary, and they have survival reasons for evolving. I mean, we share dopamine with fruit flies. It goes back a few 100 million years. So it's kind of useful, and it's not, the love drug or anything like that, or the reward drug. It's there for a number of reasons. So basically, these things exist at certain levels, and they're released in pursuit of survival goals. If you take in those same drugs in much stronger quantities from outside, you basically beat your brain with a big hammer, and it's not able to function like it's supposed to anymore. You're permanently rewiring your brain. It leads to addictions, and there's nothing good down that road.
Number 5, we've touched on this already, but don't be a loner.
We're the most social creatures on the planet. As mammals, we're social, but we're, the last part of my book, the last few chapters, called hypersocial. Human beings need social stuff. There's a longitudinal study out of Harvard or MIT where they've tracked people for 80 years, people that went to Harvard and the Southie boys of Boston that were uneducated and poor. The thing that predicts life happiness and quality of life, the quality of your social relationships. If that's not good, it's the medical equivalent of having a 2-pack a day cigarette habit. So you have to maintain social ties and be bound up into life.
I totally agree with that. Happiness, once we've got the core needs taken care of, shelter, water, food, more money doesn't make you happy. It's the people that you surround yourself with that do, and that's something I certainly doubled down with it, and I'm very careful about who I socialise with. I guard that very, very heavily. The last one is, and I love this, learn from others and teach something.
So I'd say for me personally, the 2 most eye-opening chapters in the book had to do with culture and how culture and genes co-evolved. That's what makes us unique. We're not better as individuals. We're here to download the cultural package of the tribe around us. For that chain to continue, we have to be able to learn, figure out who to learn from, devote the time to learning, but there's got to be some motivation from the other side, which I call prestige, the payoff of mentoring, of giving and paying it forward, if you will. And so that chain only exists if you learn something and then you turn around and you teach it. And we have intrinsic motivation and in Jewish terms, you'd call it nachas, or satisfaction from teaching others. So whatever it is, whatever your domain or expertise or excellence is in, learn it and then turn around and teach it.
I think that's a great way to wrap it up. I think, and I'll sum that up in terms of you're encouraging people to create something from what they've learned in their life and then to share it with other people. And that's the teaching part. I think when you share your gift with the world, which is what you're saying in number 6, I think that's where the magic really happens.
Absolutely. That's what gives meaning to life.
It does. And it only took me 50 years to work that out. And,
well, you're ahead of me. I'm 55. I'm still figuring it out.
Well, I don't have the perfect answer to anything yet, but I think there's certain insights you gain. especially when you get a little older and reflect and life happens. Tim, it's been an absolute pleasure to have a chat to you and share your gift with the world. And I'm sure there is more gift giving from you, both from stage and from books in the future. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, my pleasure. So if people want to reach out to me, they can contact me at timash.com, or information about the book is at primalbrain.com. Have to mention I have an Australia edition put out by Booktopia, my good buddy Tony Nash. So that's available to you guys in Australia and New Zealand in all formats, including the audiobook narrated by me.
Fantastic. Thank you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure, Tim.
Oh, Jeff, it's been my honor.
Do you have a business idea, or are you planning to build your personal brand online? Whatever may be your purpose, the journey to building anything online starts with a domain name. And don't take this lightly. And anything just long and clunky domain name would affect your branding in a negative way. When picking a domain name, consider going for something that is meaningful, relevant, brandable, global, and more. And the new domain extension that checks all these boxes and more is .online. Since it's a relatively new domain extension, most good domain names are still available, which means you can get the domain name you want easily on .online. And what's more, it's the perfect way to let the world know that you're online. So make the most of this branding opportunity and get your very own .online domain for 90% discount for the first year using my code JEFF, JEFF in capital letters, at www.get.online.